We've been hearing a lot about the Rothschilds lately, the shadowy banking family many suspect run the world. Well, in looking deeper into their connections, influence, and their world, it sort of looks like it. And interestingly, Jeffrey Epstein seemed to be a central figure in their world. Now, a few weeks ago, Les Wexner said Jeffrey Epstein worked for the Rothschilds. This was before his lawyer told him to shut his mouth or he'd kill him. Then Bill Clinton said he was connected to Ghislaine through the Rothschilds. And today, Representative James Comer came out and said, yes, the Rothschilds were paying Epstein.
First of all, Mr. Khan's answering every question thus far. He's completed 2 full hours of depositions. I would say we are possibly at the halfway point. It could last more than 4 hours, but he confirmed there were 5 clients that paid money to Epstein, and that was Les Wexner, Glenn Dubin, Stephen Sinofsky, the Rothschilds, and Leon Black. We've already deposed Wexner, and we're going to be deposing Leon Black very soon.
Yeah, what about deposing the Rothschilds? I doubt we're going to be seeing that anytime soon. So now you might have seen this from the Epstein files. This is an email sent by Jeffrey Epstein to Peter Thiel in 2016. And in that email, Epstein writes, quote, "As you probably know, I represent the Rothschilds. I was hoping to find a way for the bank that manages $160 billion to get involved in tech. It has been the best client list in the world and ancient products. It can wait. Good luck in China." Okay, so he's not saying I know some Rothschilds. He's saying I represent the Rothschilds. And he talks about the bank that manages $160 billion with the best client list in the world. Now, fast forward to 2018, the head of Swiss Rothschild's bank is Ariane de Rothschild. She's emailing back and forth with Jeffrey Epstein about Hitler's homeless shelter. She says, quote, or he says, quote, "I thought you'd find it amusing that in a Harvard class on Hitler, they told the story of when he was so poor he lived in a shelter for homeless and destitute that had been financed by the 3 wealthy families, the Gutmans, the Epsteins, and the Rothschilds. It turns out to be accurate." Now, Ariane, she isn't amused. She fires back and says, it doesn't matter whether the story is about generosity or not, or, that it's still a conspiracy theory and it's pathetic. But then Epstein doubles down and says, first, it turns out to be 100% true. Hitler was selling his clothes and artwork and living in a shelter funded by Jews, Epstein, Rothschild, and Gutman. No conspiracy. The Epsteins were the Vienna bankers, bought their bank on the ring, hence still Palais Epstein, which is kind of interesting. So in one email, you have Hitler, a Jewish-funded shelter, the Epstein name, the Rothschild name, and a Rothschild banker trying to bat the whole thing away as pathetic. Now, Epstein and Ariane first met in 2013, introduced by Oslo Accords diplomat Tarji Rod-Larsen. And within months, Epstein is emailing former Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Barak to get him in front of her. One of the DOJ released emails shows Epstein setting up a breakfast between Barak and Ariane de Rothschild. Now, Epstein is playing social engineer between a Rothschild banker and an ex-prime minister. And right around that time, another email appears, this one from Epstein to Barak, talking about Iran. And in that email, Epstein writes, quote, "Hopefully someone suggests getting authorization now for Iran." Authorization? Now, he's not talking about a charity grant. He's talking about war. So put those two together. Epstein arranged private breakfasts between a Rothschild bank CEO and an Israeli ex-prime minister. And Epstein told that same ex-prime minister, hopefully someone suggests getting authorization for a war with Iran. Okay. Now, by 2013, the U.S. Justice Department was cracking down on Swiss banks for helping Americans hide money. Ariane's bank, Edmond de Rothschild, is in trouble, and she turns to Epstein. Emails reported from the DOJ files show Ariane confirming the final settlement figure with Epstein, $45 million. And Epstein answers with the math, including $10 million for lawyers' fees and $25 million for me. I think you'll find a total below $80 million is quite a bargain. And a few days later, the U.S. announces that Edmond de Rothschild will pay a $45 million fine, exactly what they just discussed. How's that? So in a contract dated October 5th of 2015, it shows Epstein's Southern Trust Company based in the Virgin Islands, entering into an agreement with the Rothschilds Group. Angelo summarizes it this way. A document dated October 5th, 2015 shows Epstein, through his Southern Trust Company, entered into an agreement with the Rothschilds Group valued at $25 million. The contract covered risk analysis and algorithm-related services with Epstein listed as president of Southern Trust. And according to reporting based on those same emails, after that deal, Epstein started giving Ariane advice on how to deal with her own family. One email has him telling her, I think you should prepare a custodian motion against Benjamin, giving him the choice between you filing the motion or him voluntarily resigning. He has lost control and is a danger to both you and the family. So that's Jeffrey Epstein, the Rothschild representative, telling a Rothschild which Rothschild should be pushed out of the bank. So if you were making this up in a thriller, it would feel like pretty on the nose, right? Now, the emails show that Epstein wasn't just brokering fines. He was trying to use Ariane's bank to fund Ehud Barak's private cyber weapons venture. We've all learned the hard way that when tech companies say they care about privacy, they really don't. Alexa listens to your conversation. Meta tracks everything you click. Now, even AI platforms are collecting your chats, your thoughts, your business ideas, your private questions, all stored and analyzed on their servers. AI is incredibly powerful. It's so fun, but we shouldn't have to hand over our digital diary just to use it. And that is why I've switched to Venice.ai, a privacy-first, open-sourced AI platform that runs entirely in your browser. No spying, no tracking, no censorship. Your messages are encrypted and your conversation history stays with you, not with them. With the Venice Pro plan, you can upload PDFs for instant summaries, generate images without restrictions, and even tweak how the AI talks to you by editing the system prompt. Here's an example. I asked the same exact question to both ChatGPT and Venice. One gave me the sanitized approved response. The other gave me the truth. So if you want to use AI without giving away your most personal data, go to venice.ai/Kim. Use code Kim for 20% off a pro plan. That's venice.ai/Kim, code Kim. Protect your privacy while you still can. One report quotes Epstein relaying Ariane's condition, saying, Ariane de Rothschild sent this to me. If Ehud wants to make serious money, he'll have to build a relationship with me. Epstein then tells Barak he needs to give her time, attention, stable, reoccurring, predictable, where, what, when, is what he says. So former Israeli Prime Minister, Rothschild banker, and Jeffrey Epstein in the middle choreographing the relationship and talking about serious money and war with Iran in the same slice of time. So this is a small, tight network. In a recent deposition, Bill Clinton was asked why he was friendly with Ghislaine Maxwell, and he answered that he had mutual friends, Lynn and Evelyn de Rothschild. Watch this.
During Ms. Maxwell's interview, she stated that President Clinton was her friend, not Epstein's friend. Is that accurate?
I'd say that it was accurate to say that I felt closer to her than to him.
And for the record, why was that?
Because I had seen her more, and because she was very good friends with Evelyn Rothschild and his wife Lynn, whom I knew and was in regular touch with.
Okay. So back in 1995, before she married into the family, Lynn Forrester wrote directly to President Clinton. The Clinton archives summarized it this way. She said she had used her 15 seconds of access to discuss Jeffrey Epstein and currency stabilization. That's not us editorializing. That's how mainstream write-ups describe the letter. So in the mid-90s, you've got a future Lady de Rothschild telling a sitting U.S. president she spent her 15 seconds of access on Jeffrey Epstein and currency stabilization. Then years later, she marries into the British Rothschild line, and Bill Clinton hosts the wedding reception at the White House. Epstein, meanwhile, visited that same White House at least 17 times in the 90s. Again, Epstein, a Rothschild, a U.S. president, and the words currency stabilization in one sentence. Now, the Rothschild story starts in the Frankfurt ghetto with Mayor Amschel Rothschild trading rare coins and doing favors for princes. He becomes the banker for Prince Willem of Hesse, whose wealth includes cash from leasing Hessian soldiers to the British in the American Revolutionary War. Encyclopedia-style histories openly say Mayer and his sons eventually became bankers, to whom the French Revolutionary and Napoleonic Wars of 1792 to 1815 became a business opportunity. So that's not fringe. That's how the Rothschilds archive itself describes the rise of the family, making money off of war. Now, Mayer sends his 5 sons out like an early modern franchising operation. He sends Nathan to London, James to Paris, Solomon to Vienna, Karl to Naples, Amschel stays in Frankfurt. The 5 arrows on their logo there commemorate that network. And Nathan uses fast couriers and better intel to front-run the bond market after Waterloo. The exact numbers are debated, but he later calls it the best business I ever did. He later arranges a loan big enough to stabilize the Bank of England in a crisis, and from there the family funds or underwrites a secret loan so the British can grab a 44% stake in the Suez Canal Company. Major help to the Vatican's struggling finances, state building loans to Greece, Brazil, and others. So you don't have to believe they secretly own every central bank to see the obvious. For about a century, if a Western empire needed money for war, canals, or colonies, the Rothschilds were on the short list of the people you called. So for over 80 years, Rothschild's London house chaired the London gold fixing, the twice daily call where a small group of bullion banks agreed on a benchmark gold price. And that direct role ended in 2004 when N.M. Rothschilds and Son walked away from the bullion business and sold its seats to Barclays. Now move into the 21st century, and they show up in other sensitive places. Rothschilds and Company has advised governments on sovereign debt crises, including Ukraine's restructuring after Russia's invasion. Nathaniel Rothschild co-founded Janel Energy, which drills in Iraqi Kurdistan, a territory that's literally the outcome of U.S. war and occupation. Then there's Genie Energy, which holds oil rights in the Israeli-occupied Golan Heights. Genie's own disclosures list the members of its strategic board as Dick Cheney, Rupert Murdoch, James Woolsey, Larry Summers, Michael Steinhardt, Jacob Rothschild, and Mary Landrieu. So that's a former U.S. vice president, a media magnate, an ex-CIA director, a former U.S. Treasury secretary, a Wall Street billionaire, a former U.S. senator, and a Rothschild, all advising a company drilling in land Israel stole from Syria in 1967. So if you wanted to see how war, media, intelligence apparatus, finance, and occupied resources intersect, that one board list is a pretty good start. Now, Baron Edmund de Rothschild funded some of the first Jewish agricultural colonies in Palestine, including Rishon LeZion, now one of Israel's largest cities. He used entities like the Palestine Jewish Colonization Association to buy land and move settlers in. Theodor Herzl's pamphlet, The Jewish State, was originally conceived as a speech for the Rothschilds and at one point carried the working title Address to the Rothschilds. In other words, the founding theorists of Zionism literally wrote his pitch with the Rothschilds in mind. Then in 1917, British Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour issues the Balfour Declaration, supporting a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. He addresses it not to a foreign minister, but to Lord Rothschild, specifically Lionel Walter Rothschild, a key figure in British Zionist circles. The Rothschild family archives itself titles page Walter Rothschild and the Balfour Declaration. So you've got one branch buying land and funding settlements, and another branch receiving the letter that becomes the political foundation for Israel as a state. Jacob Rothschild later says he's been traveling to Israel every year since the 1960s and talks openly about the family's role in the country's development.
So it's possibly the most famous letter in modern Jewish history, and it begins with 3 words: Dear Lord Rothschild. Why was it that this letter was sent by the Foreign Secretary to your great-uncle Walter?
It's an interesting question because he was really interested in ornithology, although he became interested in Zionism. I think the reason was this, that it was primarily a movement from Eastern Europe, but they didn't clarify who was in charge of that movement. And in addition, it was, after all, in Great Britain. So they felt that the Rothschild family should be the one to whom it was addressed. And Walter was Lord Rothschild, and he was a Zionist. And those really are the background reasons.
Okay, so the fingerprints are everywhere. At least several towns, neighborhoods, and institutions in Israel bear the Rothschild name. So there you go. They're pretty much behind the entire creation of the State of Israel. In 1996, a group of U.S. policy intellectuals wrote a memo for Benjamin Netanyahu called A Clean Break, a new strategy for securing the realm. And it advocates taking down regional rivals, starting with Iraq and extending to Syria and beyond. And a few years later, retired General Wesley Clark says he saw a Pentagon memo after 9/11.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who had used to work for me. And one of the generals called me in. He said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, No. He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we've got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, and he said, I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran." I said, "Is it classified?" He said, "Yes, sir." I said, "Well, don't show it to me." And I saw him a year or so ago, and I said, "You remember that?" He said, "Sir, I didn't show you that memo. I didn't show it to you."
I'm sorry, what did you say his name was?
I'm not going to give you his name.
So go through the countries again.
Well, starting with Iraq, then Syria and Lebanon, then Libya, then Somalia and Sudan, and then back to Iran.
Okay. So the timeline slipped, but the countries line up with the wars and covert operations we actually watched unfold. Iraq, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria. Now we're watching it unfold in Lebanon and in Iran. And in the background of the bombs and sanctions, another pattern: central banks reorganized, oil contracts written, sovereign debt restructured with firms like Rothschilds and Company, sometimes standing by to advise. So when you see Jeffrey Epstein writing to Ehud Barak, hopefully someone suggests getting authorization now for Iran, while representing a Rothschild bank and coaching an ex-prime minister on how to tap Rothschild money for a cyber weapons venture, it starts to feel less like a random email and more like a window into how this world actually works. On February 28th of 2026, the same day the U.S. and Israel escalate into full-scale war with Iran, Nathaniel Rothschild posts this on X: "History is written by the winners, Iran Revolution 2026. Now look at that timing. Look at that hashtag. The heir to one of the most powerful banking dynasties on earth tags Iran Revolution 2026 and reminds everyone that history is written by the winners. The winners have certainly been the Rothschilds financially throughout centuries now. And maybe that's just bravado, maybe it's just commentary, or maybe it's exactly what it sounds like. A man whose family helped invent modern war finance and funded Israel into existence. He's now watching another chapter of that story unfold in real time. So here's the question. When a convicted sex offender can email Rothschild, a former prime minister of Israel, a future Rothschild, a U.S. president's lawyer, and say things like, "I represent the Rothschilds," and hopefully someone suggests getting authorization now for Iran, whose world are we actually living in? Is this just a coincidence of rich people knowing rich people? Or are we getting a rare, unfiltered glimpse into the true deep state? A shadowy banking network that's been making a killing off killing and writing the story since the days of Hessian mercenaries and Napoleon. Thanks for watching this clip from the full Kim Iverson Show, which you can catch Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Pacific, 5 p.m. Eastern, for free at KimIversonShow.com. See you there.